live, and then the moment that I clicked on go live, it just stopped working. Everything was just like stopped working. It was me and my brother, and we were like, "Oh man, what do we do now?" And we had one of the tech brothers working on it for a while, but alhamdulillah, I think it is working. So let's get started. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa nu'minu bihi wa natawakkalu alayh. Wa na'udhu billahi min shurri anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina. Man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa man yudlilhu fala hadiya lahu wa nashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa nashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu. Amma ba'd. We start off by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is worthy and He deserves all of our praise. He is the one who fashioned us. He is the one who created us. He is the one who watches over us. He is the one who takes care of all of our needs. He is the one that plans for us, and He is the one who rewards us for our hardships. And one day we will return back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and through His mercy, we will enter into Jannah. And we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mercy upon us on that day, the day that we will need mercy upon the most. We send peace and blessing upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the one that was sent as a mercy to mankind and to the whole world, who stood up at night and made dua and cried until his feet were swollen just for the sake of you and I, so that we receive Islam and we gain salvation from the fire of Jahannam and entrance into Jannah. We send peace and blessing upon the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his family members, the people who aided him and supported him, who encouraged him at times, and who gave him the ability to move forward. Amma ba'd. Alhamdulillah, today we have a great lineup. I'm going to go around and introduce all of our panelists for today's discussion. So every week we have a panel discussion at this time. At Frisco, mashallah, Sheikh Salah has started this panel discussion off, and our previous panel discussions have been very fun, and I'm hoping that today's, definitely it's gonna be a great one. But inshallah, we'll go around. We have Sister Zainab. Sister Zainab Ahmed is one of the Qalam students. Third year at Qalam, correct? Third year, mashallah. Originally from Chicago. I'm here in Dallas right now. We have Mufti Noman A Khan from Allen Masjid. Originally from New York, and you're going to hear that New York accent in a bit. But Mufti Noman is doing some great things here in Allen. He is the youth director, the education lead, has a very solid Sunday school program, very solid summer school program for previous years, and someone that I always go to bounce ideas back and forth about how to work with the youth and some of the education program for the kids. We have Brother Safi Khan, who is at Roots right now, and previously from Memphis, does a lot of stuff for Qalam. I know Qalam Connect, he had the Sira program, which was a really amazing program. Again, somebody else who who's spoken at Frisco a few times, and inshallah, we would love to have everybody, all of y'all at Frisco. Again, Amma ba'd. With the awkward introductions out of the way. Alhamdulillah, today the topic that we have is preparing us for Ramadan, taking Ramadan one step at a time. As Ramadan comes along every year, in the beginning of Ramadan, some of us are like so excited, and we kind of go all out. And I feel like a lot of that is because of the motivation that we get from the people that are around us. Going to the masjid, tarawih. If you go to the masjid and there's like rows and rows of people, you kind of feel bad just praying Isha and then dipping, right? And it's kind of not, to a certain degree, it's not impossible. You try to leave and there's like a sea of people. How do I get out of here? Okay, I'll pray tarawih. I'll pay 4, or I'll pay 8, or I'll pay all 20, right? And sometimes that motivation is negative, but sometimes the motivation is positive. However, this year, as y'all know, we're in a situation where we have to kind of like build that motivation up ourselves. And now looking at Ramadan, and realizing that it's such a huge task. How do we break it down and make it easier? Especially for the youth, where a lot of the youth, again, I was talking to some of the kids in our self-help class today, and we're kind of telling them the schedule, and they're like, Sheikh, we still actually have a full-on schedule with our classes and stuff, that assignments, and I think a lot of kids are still kind of struggling balancing the sleep act, where they're still kind of waking up. Call of Duty warfare is kind of still new. They're kind of balancing that as well, and now you have Ramadan. So I want to get you all on here and kind of like break down Ramadan and make it easier and more achievable, because again, we all want to have a successful Ramadan, a fruitful Ramadan. And I just want to kind of like have you all share your thoughts on that. I'll open the mic up to you guys. Thoughts?
Mufti Saab, go ahead. You're first up.
Hey, man. For the record, man, I do also want to start off sharing that same sentiment with Sheikh Mubin. This is my first time, of course, sharing a panel or even meeting Brother Safi and Sister Zainab, and I'm having the first time having the pleasure with them. But this has been a long time coming, myself and Sheikh Mubin, ain't that right? Like for years, man, we've been trying to make this happen. And for whatever reason, Allahu Alam, our schedules ain't matched, right? And so I'm really excited. This is someone
swapped a lot. We've swapped a lot.
We've swapped a ton, but we've never shared a panel together.
Yes.
And I'm really upset about that. So I'm this long overdue, shared panel discussion. Alhamdulillah. So for the record, this is one of my brothers. I have nothing but immense love. And if it's so much, wallahi, all the youth that are watching, all the adults that are watching, y'all are of course real blessed. With that being said, dude, it's a really interesting Ramadan, man. With that being said, right, because like all of us are still juggling a lot of responsibilities. Some responsibilities we had or have now taken a different shape and a different form altogether. Classes used to entail going out and being with people and friends and professors and like an environment. And now that same environment is in one place with family, with distractions and kids, right? Mm-hmm. And now like you kind of throw this religion into the mix and finding that balance just becomes all that much more difficult, right? So really, I was given the topic of desires, for example. That's something like, when we talk about Ramadan, and I'm sure all of us are going to discuss this, it's really not just about the fasting, right? A lot of times it becomes boiled down to that, where it's like, hey, fasting is the main hallmark of the month, but fasting is actually something which should draw and illustrate our attention towards a far bigger image, which is kind of like recalibrating your inner self, which is the main thing to begin with. Like, there's one example I like to share. It's, when you've had such a long day and you just kind of don't have the energy. So if someone comes to you a negative type of way, you just don't have the energy to even respond to that. You're just tired. I don't got the energy to respond to none of this, right? So Ramadan is like that really beautiful time where statement that usually comes out like this out of my mouth, I have a time to kind of think about that now. I have a time to think about the words before I actually say them. That actually, right. There's a filter that you now have that you really didn't have before. So Ramadan is great for that. You really get to recalibrate that inner self, right?
I know Mufti Numan knows all about the filters. He's probably Instagramming live this right now with like 10 filters on to make himself look even more handsome. MashaAllah.
He's actually TikToking right now.
TikTok has everybody's on TikTok.
Bro.
I know Sheikh Salah was telling me, mashallah, he does like short clips of recitation. If you haven't heard Sheikh Salah's recitation, mashallah, very beautiful. He does short recitation on TikTok, and it reaches a lot of people. Alhamdulillah. I know. So I completely agree that things have completely changed with the current situation. I would never have guessed that I'd be doing online classes. I know, like I said, Brother Safi does Qalam Connect classes, and You've been doing that for some time now. I would never have guessed that I would be, here with lights on this and the whole setup, doing classes. And I've pretty much been in this room all day. We had our middle school class, our high school class, went to my bedroom and down the hallway, came back here, and now with this. So things have definitely changed. And I think Ramadan will definitely reflect that. The changes, the balance, that we have going on. But let's start off with what's one of your favorite what's one of your favorite parts of Ramadan? Let's just reflecting. Let's miss the previous Ramadan, and then we'll go to coming Ramadan.
I think the conversations that a lot of our kind of community members have been having, at least in the Qalam kind of roots umbrella, everyone's kind of discussing how this Ramadan is going to be a challenge. Is gonna feel very strange in terms of the communal aspect. Because let's just be honest, a lot of people's drive in the month of Ramadan is actually because it's communal, right? It's almost like Jummah, almost like a grander scope of Jummah, right? Very few people, in the larger kind of, umbrella of Muslims go to Isha prayer every single night, right? But the one prayer that everyone tries to kind of make time for out of their work day or their, school day, whatever it is going to Jummah, right? Kids get checked out of school for Jummah, parents, adults, they take off at least 45 minutes, an hour lunch break on Fridays. And so everyone, even if you do not really feel that personal, desire or wishing or wanting to go to Jummah and spending time there reflecting, you look forward to that kind of community break. Right. And so Ramadan has, I feel in my opinion, the conversations that I've been having, a lot of people, and this isn't just, and this is by no way kind of filtering people who are religiously sound or non-religiously sound. It's just a general human nature to want to be around people during the time of Ramadan, right? It's what you're culturally brought up with. It's what you're used to. It's, you do your iftar, you go to that 20-minute inconvenient iftar party, and then you go try to make it in line for Isha and Taraweeh, right? Or you gotta running back your way up there. But that's all gone this year.
I really appreciate when people open their houses and invite us for iftar.
Yes.
But I usually try to avoid them as much as possible,
dude,
because it throws off your whole schedule. Your Maghrib is at the iftar somewhere. And then you're just rushing back, especially here in Dallas. If the iftar's I went to last year, I remember somebody had called me to an iftar party in Irving, and we were rushing back to get to Frisco. And we, just about made it. And then, Dr. Adil, who was our Amir at that time, he was looking in the back for me, texting me Sheikh Mubin, where are you? Where are you? And I just got in. I'm in time, alhamdulillah.
Sheikh, if you live in Dallas, can you combine your Maghrib and Isha prayer from Frisco to Irving?
I'm not gonna lie. When I come to Qalam campus, I actually pray 2 rakats. I pray 2 rakats because McKinney and Arlington is suffer. We got Mufti Noman here, mashallah. But yeah, it is actually suffer. So,
light from Sheikh Mubin, I say okay. I agree.
So sorry, you were saying your favorite part of Ramadan.
Yeah. So having said, kind of preface that, my favorite part of Ramadan, honestly, I know everyone's favorite parts are sometimes the evening times, but personally, my favorite part of Ramadan is actually the mornings. I feel the mornings are kind of the times where it's kind of very, very personal between you and Allah. Even if you're at Fajr Salah, at the masjid, pre-Fajr Salah, you're doing your iftar. And if you wake up a little bit before, iftar, and you just don't wake up 5 minutes before, you get that really, really sweet kind of personal time with yourself and Allah, where it's not a massive group of people at the masjid, and it happens to be a very, very beneficial time for you. And I think this year is actually going to be stretched out to all day, right? Ramadan is going to be extremely personal. An aspect of, being a human being is we sometimes thrive off of kind of being in that, friend kind of group communal environment. And sometimes being one-on-one with somebody makes us a little bit uncomfortable. You know, I actually gave this kind of analogy to a lot of the youth earlier this week at Roots, not at Roots, obviously we're quarantining, but online, is that how many friends do we have that we spend time with them in a group only? But when you kind of separate it into one-on-one, you're like, oh man, what do we talk about? Right? Like, and this is actually going to be kind of like a really interesting year with everyone's personal relationship with Allah, you know, where it's kind of forced to be one-on-one, and inshallah, you know, I'm very curious to be what the challenge is going to look like for all of us, you know. So
I you know, I was Brother Tokir from Boston. He had me speaking. I'm gonna miss him this year on Hajj. You know, if we go Hajj, if we don't go Hajj, Tokir, I said Tokir that I'm bringing my ihram. I'm coming to Boston.
Yeah, dude.
I was speaking for Sharon Masjid, and we were talking about, you know, the seven groups of people that will be under the shade of the throne of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, and the last one being a person who worships Allah alone. And I was kind of, you know, reflecting on, you know, just the same thing that we love, or it's very easy to worship Allah in groups, you know, at the masjid, at a qiyam, you know, going from different masjid to a halaqah, this, that. But, you know, this narration talks about like worshiping Allah all alone. وَرَجُلٌ ذَكَرَ اللَّهَ خَالِيًا. No one's around. You know, not his wife, not his children. وَفَادَتْ عَيْنَاهُ, and then his eyes begin to tear. And it's a very scary question. You know, do we have a relationship with Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, a one-on-one relationship with Allah Subhanahu wa Taala when no one's around? And the answer, you know, is usually no. So it might be that awkward relationship where you're kind of forced to be with Allah one-on-one now. But again, I look at this Ramadan that's coming up to be a very unique opportunity. I don't think if you ever want a Ramadan like this for the rest of your life, you are not going to get it. Right? You know, whether it be, you know, forced upon us that we're locked away in our homes, you know, in the rest of your life, you will never get a Ramadan like this. And the closeness that you can, you know, build with Allah Subhanahu wa Taala as a family, you know, I think it's untouchable. You know, one of my favorite parts of Ramadan, and you know, we'll kind of go into this with you know, I know Sister Zainab has some thoughts on this, is like, you know, that I know you said, you know, that alone time with Allah Subhanahu wa Taala before iftar, you know, in the daytime. But one of my favorite times is at night. You know, I try to build my schedule every Ramadan where I stay awake until sahur, and you know, how to do my time for ibadah, my alone time, my reflection time, and then, you know, kind of get a couple of rakats for the tahajjud in. And you know, for me, that's one of my favorite times, you know, of Ramadan, where you've been through the madness of being in the community, you know, around everybody, but then it's really important for me to have that alone time and just reflect back on the day, on the bounties of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. But I know Sister Zainab has some thoughts about this. I'll hand it off to her, inshallah.
So in terms of like having the nighttime, the first thing I think is even waking up, right? So sometimes after having a long day in our normal schedules, being of such that we sleep at night, waking up for suhoor or tahajjud altogether is a challenge. And sometimes we say that, oh, you know, like we already ate or whatever, so like forget the suhoor, forget the tahajjud, right? So I think first thing is to even like build that to wake up for suhoor and have suhoor. For myself, I know it's always like a struggle because I'll stay up all night, you know, we'll do all-nighters and whatnot, but that 30 minutes right before actual suhoor time, it'll feel like you're on the sleeping spell and you just can't keep your eyes open, right? And that's when, you remember that suhoor is a time of barakah. We're always looking for things to add barakah to our days. We're trying to do this, we're trying to do that. And Prophet ﷺ tells us to have suhoor because it adds barakah to our day. And when we have suhoor, it also shows to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, Ya Allah, I'm in need of food. As a human being, we require nourishment. And when we're having that suhoor, it's like, Ya Allah, I need this, but I'm stopping this for you, for your sake. And this is one of the reasons why having suhoor at suhoor time rather than having a late dinner, the scholars recommend this is because it shows that to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so the scholars suggest us to have suhoor towards the end time, right? Like closer to Fajr. And then also to have iftar immediately closer to as Maghrib comes in, or after Maghrib comes in. So fasting, I like to think of it as this action that's kind of like a container. And you're trying to fill it up with as much good as possible. Kind of like how when as kids we used to do the piñatas at our parties, and when you crack that piñata open, all of us children would rush to grab that candy before it's all gone, right? You're just trying to fill it in that bag because in seconds it's gonna be gone. So similarly, we're trying to fill this container, like our fast or our day, our Ramadan, with as much good as possible. And when we don't wake up for suhoor, it kind of shows that leaving out food or not having food, being hungry all day is not that big of a deal. And it kind of makes our fast a little less meaningful. And then going back to the tahajjud thing, this time of suhoor is also a time of barakah. So not only is having suhoor barakah, but the time itself is a barakah because it's the same time as what we know of tahajjud. And sometimes I think, especially as us kids, when we think of tahajjud, we think of something that's like something really, really difficult, something distant, something that old people do, pious people do. But Prophet ﷺ makes this very easy for us, right? He advises us that this is a time that we're the closest to our Rabb. And he tells us that if you're able to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, do some dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And remembering him can really mean anything, right? So you can do some hamd, say alhamdulillah for the food you have in front of you, the family you have around you. Say bismillah before you eat. For everybody, remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can mean something very different. And remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a very easy action, right? We can remember him in anything we're doing. This is also a time that a lot of people like to take out to pray some salah, pray some tahajjud. In Surah Furqan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that his very special servants are those who spend a portion of the night doing sajda and standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This simple action, it gets us to the status of being his special servants. Think about what that means. It's kind of like we're getting on the VIP list of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to get our du'as answered. We know from a hadith that Prophet ﷺ tells us every single night during the last third of the night, while everyone is usually sleeping, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala descends to the first heaven, to the sama'ud dunya. And then he asks, who is making dua to me? Who's calling out to me? So I can answer to him. Who's asking me for something so I can give it to him? And this kind of shows us to take a second to think about this. It shows us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to turn to him. He wants us to ask him. He wants us to be on that VIP list. When I think about this, it feels as though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is directly telling me, Zainab, come to me, ask me. I want you on that VIP list. I want to answer your du'as. I want to make things easy for you that you're struggling with. We say we say just a phone call away. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is even closer than that. If we wanted to speak to a king or a celebrity, We find it's very difficult to even get 15 minutes of their time or even less than that. Even if we want to speak to a teacher, we have to go through this process, right? What time works for you? What time works for me? What's your schedule like? What's my schedule like? But the King of all kings, the Rabbul Alameen, he's telling us to come to him and ask him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there to hear us, especially in the middle of the night. This is a good time for us to even ask for ease in our fast. Sometimes we find it difficult to fast. It's a really good time to, as you're having a suhoor, oh Allah, make this fast easy for me. But again, I know tahajjud feels like a difficult concept, and what's one thing that works really well for me, especially since I know that I have to make wudu for Fajr regardless, is I find it easier to just make wudu before I eat, to pray tahajjud. That way I'm like actually awake while I'm eating and I'm not dragging, making things difficult for my parents. And then once I've made wudu, it feels like an easier task to take out a few minutes and pray, right? So for example, if Fajr comes in at 5:30, I think these days, and we wake up at 5 a.m. for suhoor, set alarm for 4:45, 4:50, 10 to 15 minutes earlier. That way you can do wudu, pray 2 rakat, make some dua afterward. This way we're utilizing already being awake. We don't have to go through the extra effort of waking up. We're already making wudu for Fajr. We're just rearranging things a little bit. But for some, this is difficult. And I remember my Nani Jan, she used to tell me that, if praying tahajjud is something difficult, just make dua in your heart during that time. It can just be while you're laying in bed. It can be while you're preparing your suhoor. Just make that dua in your heart, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can hear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hears your du'as. It's coming back to that hadith now. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says that who's asking me for forgiveness so I can grant him forgiveness? Sometimes, because we have so many sins, we feel ashamed to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we forget how merciful Allah He is, how Rahim He is. And we need it. We need to go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness because we need His forgiveness. And this comes with realizing and accepting our sins, as well as getting to understand ourselves better. And lastly, it's important to keep in mind that we said the last third is very special, but any time of the night we can pray tahajjud. The entire time of the night is for tahajjud. And it's really important that we understand this. It's kind of like, we can eat dinner at 6 p.m. It's really good for us, but we can eat dinner really at any point of the night. We're not gonna not eat dinner because we didn't eat at 6 p.m. Something that may work really well for some people is to actually pray those 2 rakats after Isha. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you that opportunity, He wakes you up at the last third of the night, He gives you that strength, then you pray again. Also, I think, make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give you that tawfiq. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah, I want to pray these 2 rakat. Oh Allah, you help facilitate it. Sometimes we also tell ourselves though that I'm gonna wake up at the tahajjud time and pray. Right now, let me just do other things. I'll pray at that time. And once we're up for suhoor, we tell ourselves, what? I already prayed my 2 rakat after Isha, and I don't need to pray now. Allow yourself to, if you prayed then, you're getting the opportunity to pray now. Allow yourself to pray again. Allow yourself to fill that container. Get more of those candies to fill in your treat bag. And by waking up just 15 minutes earlier, 10 minutes earlier, we get to fulfill the sunnah of suhoor. We're getting at the tahajjud in. We're being counted in that special VIP list, and we're getting our du'as answered. I think this sounds like a win-win situation.
Jazakallah khair. And I think you brought up a lot of great points. Especially when you talk about that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so easily available to us. I know when I have to get in contact with Mufti Noman, we set up a phone call, we play phone tag for a couple of days, we miss each other, text each other, WhatsApp, and then finally after a few days we kind of get free and we're able to get on the same page. And I think the point that you made is very practical, that when you first off, when you look at sahur, I think that a lot of people are at different wavelengths of sahur. Some people, they go all out. Have you guys ever like had sahur? I remember once in England, I was staying at a friend's house, and he woke me up for sahur, and I go downstairs, and they had like a full table full of food, nihari, biryani, like cereal, like everything, and it's like, wow, like I'm not sure if I can like consume this much food so early in the morning. And I know a lot of households are like that, where sahur, the mom is up making paratha early morning, and the fire alarm is going off, and that's where everybody kind of wakes up. But then you have some people that, as a kid, I remember my mother would bring water to my bed and like, no, you're gonna drink now because you need to show Allah that you need water.
Right.
And I'll be in bed, and she put the cup to my mouth. I'll take a few sips, either water or Gatorade, plug in for Gatorade, and then that was it. But then you also get people that don't care about sahur. Like I don't need to wake up. On the other hand, you get people that are so dependent on sahur, and I kind of want to get your thoughts on this, that if they miss their sahur for any reasons, Mufti Saab, they're like, nah, I don't gotta pray. I don't gotta fast, all right? I'm not fasting because I missed my sahur today. Is that even legit? Can I do that?
So I think it's just, going back to that same idea. Sister Zainab touched on a few really important points, like fasting, especially suhoor. It's not breakfast, right? And if I miss it, and I'm just taking it lightly, like, oh, cool, I can last throughout the entire day anyway, and so let me just dismiss it. That wasn't the idea to begin with. The whole idea was exactly what we've been discussing. It's that time where I can connect. It's that time where I can kind of, start my day thinking, having thought about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So, and then kind of going back to that question, if I do miss it, then of course I have to continue fasting, right? It's it's not something that is mandatory or contingent upon the validity of the fast. If I miss suhoor, I have to continue fasting throughout the rest of the day. But I have definitely, of course, I'm gonna be hungry throughout the rest of the day with the long fast, and it's real hot, right? So that's definitely gonna be there. But I've more so missed out on just a massive opportunity to, kind of even inch that much closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, So those times, and that one point that was also mentioned just about like, if you're still in bed, and this isn't like a past excuse, right? To be like, all right, you know what? But let me just make dua in my heart. You get what I'm saying? The whole month is gonna go by. Let me just make dua in my heart. So the idea isn't really that, but say you had a really long day, right? You had finals that you had to prepare for. You had a whole day of work that you were at, right? And so it was genuinely tough. The least that we could do is always constantly have Allah on our mind. So definitely don't miss the fast if you haven't done so.
And I know, like, sahur time is actually one of the hot times for dua, because like I can straight up say this: if I'm asleep, I'm not waking up for anybody unless it's like my immediate family. A lot of time Muhammad will like, I'll be in bed and he'll like be, pulling on my hair, pulling my beard, like, wake up, I want to play. And that doesn't even get me out of bed. But the one thing that will get me out of bed is sahur, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's the only reason I would wake up at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. just for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
I think, Sheikh Mubin, one thing real quick, I wanted to kind of just chime in here before we move on to another thought, is that, like, and something that Mufti Noman actually just mentioned, a lot of things in Islam have to do more with your obedience towards Allah than what makes logical sense to you.
Yeah.
Right. I think, a lot of people, I mean, especially young people, I'm thinking from like a young person's mind, right? Like a 16, 17-year-old's mind. I'm like, you know what? Like, I'm good, right? Like, I ate a big, like dinner last night after I came back from Tarawih, knocking out, right? I can last, right? And, and that's the thing with a lot of people, is that, we tend to rationalize a lot of our shortcomings, right? We're like, it's okay. I can pass this off. I'm good, right? But I think one thing that we need to kind of make sure we understand is that Islam, and specifically Ramadan, is more so about how your obedience to Allah actually plays out, rather than like your own kind of rationalizing what you can and cannot do, right? Yeah, sure. I mean, hey man, maybe you can like last without suhoor in the morning and last till Maghrib prayer at night. But it's not about that. It's more so if you can put your ego to the side, right? And be like, no, you know,
my
like
brother-in-law, sorry, I know my brother-in-law, like,
No, go ahead.
he would fast for like 3 days straight, no food, nothing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think you're
Like,
absolutely
not
right. That,
breaking the fast? Is that what you mean?
like, yeah, like an intermediate, long-term intermediate fast for like 3 days. And we're not talking about Islamic fasting.
Mufti stopped talking about Ramadan. He's like, wait, his Ramadan is
Well, which Ramadan are we doing here again? My bad.
No, Ramadan is where, like, you know, too many samosas, pakoras, for you to go more than, you know, 18 hours. But I think that's a really good point. You know, it's not about how much you can do. It's about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking you to do. And just bring that, you know, understanding your position in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that as a servant, this is what Allah wants from me. I'm not going to do more, even if I can, or I'm not going to do less. This is what Allah wants. You know, and I think she brought a good point that, you know, as soon as Maghrib time hits, we're told to eat right away. You know, and whereas, you know, you go to a masjid and Desis will be sitting there with a khajur in one hand, just right at their mouth, and as soon as the azan drops, just munch away. And that shows that, you know, oh Allah, we need this food, and we stop eating just for your sake. But I think, like, you know, so one part of Ramadan is definitely the food part, and you know, waking up in the morning, doing sahur, and I, you know, like I said before, that's a beautiful like. Sorry, let me take a step back. Before we were talking about, you know, waking up in the morning, if you make the sacrifice for Allah, that is a golden time for you to make that dua, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching you, and He knows that you woke up out of bed just for His sake. You know, your dua at that time will be accepted. So, you know, instead of worrying about if you got the paratha or not, and, you know, how much nihaya you got on your plate, you know, sit down and make some dua at that time. It's a beautiful, beautiful time early in the morning, where the, you know, majority of mankind is sleeping, and you're calling out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But, you know, like I was saying before, you know, food is one aspect of Ramadan. Another aspect of Ramadan is, like, you know, controlling our desires, right? And there's a huge pull when we talk about controlling our desires, and a huge discussion. I know, Mufti Rahman, you had something about controlling your desires in the month of Ramadan. It's a hard thing, you know. I know a lot of people, every year when the whole moon sighting thing happens, and we're told that we get one more day of not having Ramadan, a lot of people get happy. That one more day for me to, like, you know, play out my desires and do some more haram before I have to become, you know, all pious again. But, you know, let me hear some, Mufti, let me get your thoughts on, you know, controlling our desires in the month of Ramadan.
Man, you know, to that point, I remember there was one of our shuyukh in New York, down in New York. He mentioned just on the same idea, because one of the kids was just like, you know, really ecstatic that exactly that same thing, that Ramadan was one day delayed, right? And so he could chill and do whatever he needs to do. So the teacher was like, listen, when you have a car and say you're driving about 60, 70 miles per hour, and when you intend to stop that vehicle, is when you apply the brake, that's not when the car is going to stop. That's only when the car has begun to stop.
Yeah.
But it's going to take several yards, 100 yards, right? Several hundred feet to eventually come to your intended stop, right? It was such a simple example, but I swear it hit home. It made so much sense. The idea was, if I'm really, truly trying to maximize my Ramadan, and I have this intent that, all right, cool, I really need to get my, you know, religious identity together, and I really want to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I really want to make the most of this, then this upcoming Monday, I should probably be fasting, right? The past Thursday that passed, I should have probably been fasting. Like, just this preparation, right? Just to kind of mentally be ready for this month. And so, you know, and this locking out kind of everything concept, it's not something which is Islamic, right? Or specific to Islam. There's, like, for example, the playoffs were supposed to start, what is it, today or yesterday? Like, yeah, was it?
I think it was yesterday. Yeah.
Reading something, right? So
we're gonna see LeBron and the Lakers dominate.
So speaking of LeBron has this concept when it comes to, for example, the playoffs. It's called 0 dark 30, right? So the idea is that he cuts off from everything. everything. There's reporters asking him about headlines that he's in himself. And he's like, I got no idea what you're talking about. Because he's off social media, he's off of his phone, he's off everything. And when he's asked about what the intention behind this is, what do you get out of disconnecting from social media? It don't hurt to go look at Instagram. It don't hurt to go read that post on ESPN. What do you get out of that? For me to maximize my opportunity to win the championship, which is my goal, which is everyone's goal.
Yeah.
I need to lock out everything and anything. And so it's honestly that same idea, right? It's that same concept. It's that same idea. It's that I have an end game, I have a goal, I have a purpose. And in order for me to get to that, just naturally, I have to kind of block out some of these other avenues. So like, whatever, man, I'll throw up the topic. I'm not talking about the permissibility or impermissibility of listening to music. But I guess it is fair to say that, hey, if I do agree that the heart is like a room, and this room has many doors to it, right? It's the eyes that Allah has given me. It's the ears that Allah has given me, right? It's these different things that ultimately lead to my heart. So if I'm listening to things like, that just aren't the greatest things, right, to listen to. Again, I'm not talking about permissibility or impermissibility. Just naturally, it has that subconscious effect on us. So I think for this month, I'm going to just put it to the side. Right? Now there comes this concept, well, okay, but, I ain't trying to be fake, man. Like, it makes no sense for me to start this month. And then right after that, I'm going to go back to listening to it anyway. So why can't I just listen to it now? And so there's this beautiful hadith of Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas, where he was reminding this companion and he was telling him about the Quran. And he said, Inna hadha al-Quran nazala bihuzn, right? The Quran was revealed with sentiment and emotion tied to it. So فَإِذَا قَرَأْتُمُوهُ, so whenever you read it, فَبْكُوا, cry, right? Actually reflect over it and let it resonate with you and cry. فَإِن لَمْ تَبْكُوا, but if you can't cry, right? فَتَبَاكُوا, then imitate or kind of pretend, right, that you're crying. And so the whole idea isn't to pretend and be like fake, right, or be a hypocrite, but the idea is that, all right, if I'm not at that state right now where I could cry, right, or if my heart just hasn't cried any tears in a really long time, let me at least start somewhere in hopes that I can eventually get there, right? So, Ramadan is that really awesome time because you're just your energy is capped. You're already limited. So you really have it within your full discretion to choose how you want to utilize that energy, where you want to put it, what you want to say, how you want to speak to someone, all of those things. And when we read these ayahs, كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, it's really just that. It's encapsulating that whole idea of just learning about yourself, right? And learning about yourself enough to be able to connect yourself back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So desires, man, are really, really tough because we're going to face them the rest of our lives. But Ramadan is that 1 month, just that boot camp. Like, just put yourself through some really rigorous training and you'll be pleased. If you put in the effort, you'll be pleased with what you come out with. The result that you see, you'll be like, man, I didn't know I could kick that habit to the curb for 30 days, right? Like I used to have a couple of my friends back in New York. They had like, they would smoke cigarettes, right? And it's like, okay, cool. After your iftar, you could go ahead and technically do that, right? You're not fasting anymore. But it's like 30 days in, they didn't do it. Just that satisfaction, right? Like of being able to stay away from something that they hadn't been able to for so long. Mentally, you feel accomplished. Your iman has that boost, so that you already feel accomplished. It's just all in all, right? It's just kind of how Sister Zainab mentioned, it's like a win-win situation. So desires, again, are something we're going to face the rest of our lives. Allah gives us that excuse to really analyze what those excuses are that I always make, to put them to the side and to actually do something about it.
I think you bring a good point that the heart is like a room and there are many doors to the room. And when you look at the room of the heart, it's the space in there, the capacity is limited. Only a certain amount of things can be in there, right? You can't just take everything. And certain things that come into your heart, I remember once I was on the phone with Ford for my car, and I was on hold, and they had the radio playing, and and I wasn't even listening. Right, they had the radio playing. It was some talk show, and later on that day in Asr Salah, I'm in the second rakat, and in my mind pops in, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there, and I said, "What?" And then I thought to myself, it's because I heard that so many times on the radio while on the call. And now that jingle kind of like popped in my mind, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. And it hit me that, my heart is like a room. It only has a certain amount of capacity. If, you engage in something that is haram, it will take away from the spirituality of, imagine that you're in the masjid and you're in like game time mode where you really want to ask Allah for forgiveness, but in your mind, certain lyrics are coming, or what's happening next in your favorite show that's coming. So I completely agree that a person's intention, what they take in has a huge effect. And if you can cut some of these things out, be like LeBron, go beast mode, and cut some of these things out. And if he could do that for the dunya, right, for a possibility of a ring, then the hadith comes to mind where the Prophet ﷺ says, may that person be cursed who gets the month of Ramadan, but he exits Ramadan the way he entered Ramadan without being forgiven. So if he could do that for a ring, then you and I definitely need to go beast mode and like kind of, cut things out of our lives to get forgiveness in the month of Ramadan.
They don't call him the GOAT for no reason, right? So
SubhanAllah.
Man, Malik, I was plugging LeBron today, man.
I'm from Chicago, so right issues.
I can't rep New York, right? So I have to rep something.
You're right.
New York has been sleeping for a while. New York has been sleeping. But when you talk about desires, one of course desires is that a lot of the haram things that people are engaged in, and we don't hate them, or it's very understandable because the dunya is surrounded and with temptations. So for a person to stay away from those temptations, that is, out of the normal now, right? Whether these haram things is, talking to the opposite gender, watching stuff that they shouldn't be watching, having haram, inappropriate thoughts, outside the month of Ramadan. And, once Ramadan comes, it's hard to let go of some of those habits. Some of the things that, I had this one brother come up to me. He's like, Sheikh, I don't know how many fasts I've broken. So first he asked me, he goes, what's the penalty for breaking one fast? I'm like, well, it's 60 fasts and that's continuous. He's like, oh man. So he goes, Sheikh, I don't know how many I broke. So I'm like, you're not that big. And he's like, no, it's not from food, Sheikh. And I was like, SubhanAllah. And that right there told me that, temptation and desires while fasting, fighting those temptations. We're not talking about food, find those temptations with shaitan. He may be locked up, but he's pre-programmed us for 11 months. It's hard. It is hard to let go of some of those habits, from going 60 miles an hour. I know if you drive way faster. I've sat in the car with you, and then all of a sudden like slamming the brakes and then coming to a halt. It doesn't happen like that. That car keeps rolling even when you want it to stop.
And I drive a Honda Accord. Okay, I don't know, for the record, that thing goes 60 miles per hour, so can't even go fast.
The Honda Accord Sports,
everybody watching the live thinks I'm from reckless New York.
I think everybody in New York is reckless.
Dude, New York drivers, wallahi. So my wife is from New York, and whenever I go visit my in-laws, I drive on the New York highways, and it's not natural. Like the ways that people drive in New York. First of all, the lanes are this thin.
Right.
And it's only 2 lanes. Like there's nothing called a 4-lane highway in New York, right? It's
so they say if you could drive in New York, you can drive anywhere. You know that, right?
That's true.
Right before lockdown and the whole COVID thing went back, I went back to Chicago after 2 years. Going back home to Chicago was like amazing, but I realized that I was not a Chicago driver anymore.
F-150 can't fit it.
Like,
Fix about soft, man. He got super soft.
Texas driving made me soft. Like, this guy was like stopped at the light and I didn't horn at him. And the person behind me horned, like, what are you doing? You're supposed to horn. And I didn't cut people off. And like when I got cut off, I was like so offended. Like, what did I do? And I realized that Dallas driving has softened me up. But and you look at that that same point, our a'mal and our deeds in the month of Ramadan, they have the ability to soften us up. Right? Where after 30 days, then these sins. So if you have a good 30 days and you come here to Dallas and you're driving like a human being, then after the 30 days, that kind of seemed abnormal when somebody's cutting you off. But I know one of the huge things about the month of Ramadan is like scheduling, right? It's so easy, and especially now that we're at home. I was talking to somebody the other day, and at 3 p.m., and I kid you not, he's like, "Yeah, I just woke up."
Dude, that's my little brother every day. What are you talking about?
I was like, at 3 p.m., I'm like,
like, why you make it for my family, man?
9 o'clock, Muhammad wakes up. And if I don't wake up by 9:10, I get like a small finger in my nose, like trying to wake me up. So I know like one of the big things about Ramadan is scheduling. So everybody bless us with something about how to schedule sleeping, ibadat, just kind of putting a balance to some of these things.
I think, I think the way that we live in our kind of context and culture is very interesting because the sunnah tells you one thing and what we're used to is something very different, right? Especially, the idea that the Prophet ﷺ used to kind of start his day with like Fajr, right? There's actually a study done. It's really, really interesting. I was actually reading this. We're doing this series at Roots called Ramadan Ready, where we're kind of talking about a little different kind of like aspect to Ramadan every single day. And one of the topics was sleep and how to manage your time. And I remember I saw a study that was done that a reason why so many of the millennial Gen Z kind of generation struggle so much with waking up on time or, oversleeping is because we don't start our day when the sun actually rises. Yeah. A lot of people actually sleep in. I mean, I'm actually kind of like a victim to this because, they have these things called blackout curtains. I don't know if you guys have ever been to IKEA, but like, man, subhanAllah, man, that stuff's like a fitna and a blessing at the same time. It's like blocks out the sun until, like, dude, you could sleep through the Maghrib, man. And, yeah, but the reality is that, we're just so used to kind of like this idea of sleeping in that waking up early is just very, very alien to us. And it's actually because the study, it was not like a non-Islamic, completely secular study that people have trouble starting their day or being productive is because you sleep through like a good 3-4 hours of sunlight. And that's if you're like an early riser, right? I mean, 3-4 hours of sunlight is like 9 a.m. or 9:30 a.m. People right now, let's just be real, people waking up at like noon, 1 o'clock even. We got to do like, instead of Fajr wake up calls, we do like Asr wake up calls. It's crunch time now, man. And so like the culture of like sleep is just completely, it's just very, very different from what the Sunnah actually tells us to do, right? And so, the moment that you actually came up to me and said, we're doing this kind of session and you and me were going back and forth about time, I immediately kind of like got shaken into reality because earlier that day we were actually talking about Surah Al-Asr. The first ayah, Surah Al-Asr, wal Asr, innal insana lafi khusr, right? Verily, all of mankind is immersed in this idea called khusr, right? And for people who are listening in that don't really understand what the word khusr is, Prophet Adam alayhi salam, he made a dua, right? رَبَّنَا ظَلَمْنَا أَنفُسَنَا وَإِن لَمْ تَغْفِرْ لَنَا وَتَرْحَمْنَا لَنَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ. He goes, without the forgiveness of Allah and the mercy of Allah, we will be considered as khasirin. Khasirin, obviously, khusr, khasirin share the same root, means like an eternal, very, very deep, sincere, saddening loss, right? And so this idea of time and loss is a very unique thing. And I think, again, like I think Sister Zainab was mentioning this earlier, is that a lot of, and Mufti Saab was also mentioning this, that a lot of young people think they're like the exceptions to the rules, right? I can survive without support. right? I can go one more day without this or one more day without that. And the same thing is true about this idea of like kind of like a loss of time. You know, the crux of a young person is that they think that they have all this time in the world. And I think everyone sitting here can kind of testify to this, that as you get older, you start to realize that, man, time really is just like slipping. It's like holding onto water, right? Like you literally try to retain it, it just kind of like seeps through your fingertips. And the reality is that people who lose out on Ramadan are people who actually don't understand that time and place concept. And Mufti Saab was mentioning this, like when LeBron goes into playoff mode, like social media gone, you know, just kind of wasting time gone. It's just kind of full on in the zone type of moment. And I think the first step of realizing how to manage your time in Ramadan is understanding that it is 30 days out of 365 days of the year, you know. You know, and this also goes with, you know, I remember this is when I was younger. I'm 27, alhamdulillah. So when I was like a 21, 22-year-old, I remember I was like fresh into the youth director scene. I was kind of like, you know, when you're younger, you kind of like mouth off to people once in a while. But like, you know, this uncle was saying like, he was like, oh, you know, I wish Ramadan was like the entire 365 days of the year. Obviously, he was speaking about the, you know, like the kind of like the blessings, the atmosphere of Ramadan. And I'm like, Uncle Saab, no, right? Like, I was like, this is not, no. And the way I was coming out is because, you know, if Ramadan really was 365 days of the year, we would lose that sense of urgency, right? You know, we would lose that sense of urgency. I mean, think about it, right? Like, this is the whole idea of like, imagine like when there's a sale, like Black Friday, for example. When Black Friday is a thing, people lose their minds. Like, people are out on like the Apple store outside of the mall at like 1 a.m., 2 a.m. And you know it because it's a limited amount of time that you have to kind of maximize on this opportunity. And Ramadan works the exact same way. So I think the first step in our conversation about managing time or understanding the special nature of Ramadan is really understanding that it is only limited, right? It's very limited. And I think the only way to appreciate that is talk to people who are older than you. You know, I know some of my most amazing conversations about Ramadan have not been with my teachers, have not been with, you know, my friends. It's actually been with my grandmother. Yeah. Because you know, my grandmother, who, mashallah, you know, may Allah preserve her, she's 87 years old now. Wow. And she, man, dude, if there was a person in my life who treats like each year as though it's her last year, it's my grandmother. You know, whether she was 78 or 88, 87, like it's the same to her, right? That this could be my last, this could be my last, this could be my last. I think understanding that is a very, very important thing. And I think, you know, things like, you know, Kobe Bryant's death that happened in January, things that are really kind of out of the ordinary that shock us to the core are just examples. Sorry, my cat is, subhanAllah, man. But
I know Zainab has a huge phobia.
It's so annoying, man. It's like whenever I try to teach Qalam Connect, and I'm teaching teenagers, so like any distractions, bro, any distractions just gets to it, and my cat walks across the screen, and they're like, "Wait, so who's a prophet?" And so, you know, I think that's the first step of understanding or managing time is just, you know, talking to people that have been there and done that, you know, and they've kind of managed it themselves. Number two, I think, is to really, really exercise this idea of what Mufti Saab was saying earlier, is limiting your kind of exposure to social media and your phone, man. I think, you know, one of the biggest Achilles heels of our generation is that we are just constantly flipping through phones, flipping through our feeds, flipping through this, reading this article, reading that story, reading that person's tweet or that, you know, person's status. And sometimes we actually fall asleep doing that. I mean, I would love to do a study and ask a lot of young people, how many of y'all go to sleep listening to something or watching something? You know, I really am eager to do that study because I want to know how many people actually go to sleep like with their eyes closed and like nothing in front of them. And also scientifically, like that whole LED light thing kind of like keeps people up nowadays, right? And so I think a big tip is to kind of make sure to keep our phones down and not have that distraction where we limit our excuses, right? And Ramadan, again, is a month where your true self comes out, man. You know, like the narration of Shaitan being locked up in Ramadan, it actually terrifies some people. It terrifies me because I realize if I do something wrong in Ramadan, it's me, bro. Yeah. I got nobody to blame. And obviously, you know, the rest of the year, we kind of try to be like, oh yeah, Shaitan this, Shaitan that. And, you know, like I kind of got like, you know, the West got to me, man. Like, but at the end of the day, like on the day of judgment, man, Shaitan's gonna be sitting there be like, no, I just literally like, I planted the seed and you just ran with it, right? I unlocked the door. You're the one that actually opened it. And I think Ramadan, we don't even have that excuse. We don't even have that. We don't even have that excuse of shaitan opening the door for us. Like we opened the door, ran through it, and everything all at one time. So I think those kind of small points are really big in terms of just kind of managing your time in Ramadan. Obviously, some other points are, making sure that following the tradition of the Prophet. I remember there's a very beautiful hadith in the life of the Prophet where it was a conversation between him and Aisha radiallahu anha, and he actually told her before he went to sleep, do not make my bed too comfortable. Do not make my bed too comfortable. And that's almost like this mentality that he's a visionary. He's thinking ahead, right? He's thinking that, a lot of us, before we go to bed, we fluff our pillows, make sure that like our comforter is like exactly the way we like it. If it's not, we're going to throw a fit, right? Like, but the Prophet was thinking ahead. He was thinking to like when he wakes up for prayer. And him telling Aisha radiallahu anha, like, do not make my bed too comfortable. Man, that's just dedication. That's just straight up dedication that before you even go to sleep, you're thinking about waking up. I think those are some things to think about, inshallah, in terms of managing our time well and kind of, understanding what sleep is and not to kind of squander the limited amount of time that you have, because, man, you kind of waste this concept of time in Ramadan, and it's just, you're going to have to wait a whole nother year if Allah allows you to actually witness another year, then that's a big, that's a big ask to begin with, because, anything could happen.
I think we live in a world where it's all about comfort, right? It's talking about IKEA. I remember we went there and they have comforters that are hot and cold. Right? And I didn't know. I thought comfort was just like a blanket that you throw on top of yourself. It keeps you warm. You snuggle up, and that's it. But they have comfort of hot and cold, Tempur-Pedic beds, different types of pillows, different, and all of this kind of goes against the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ told us, Aisha anha, don't make my bed too comfy so that I can wake up. And we're not telling people to sleep on the floor or throw out your mattresses, but make that a priority of actually waking up. And I think it's a great point that you said that 30 days, but if you kind of sleep in those 30 days, then what have you done? But Imam al-Ghazali, he brings a very good point. He goes that if you cannot stop yourself from sinning, then go to sleep. Right? The only time that you should sleep in is that if you know that when I wake up I'm going to commit a sin, or if you feel the urge of doing something haram, go to bed. Right? And I think that's very beautiful. But managing time in Ramadan, not sleeping in until you can go on YouTube and they'll have like all these like hilarious videos about people waking up like seconds before iftar and eating. I think you're really missing out the essence of Ramadan. Ramadan is about building a better version of yourself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, tabarakalladhi biyadihi mulk, we're actually doing tafsir. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is the greatest and he's above everything. He doesn't need our ibadat, but he gives us this month to work on ourselves. Right? It's not like our ibadat is going to do something for Allah, but he gives it to us to kind of polish ourselves, kind of wake up those, or get rid of those inner demons that we have, whether it's, just being heedless or being, just forgetting about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, being ugly to other human beings, talking, foul to other human beings, whatever, it's in the tongue, it's into the heart, through your whole body parts, but just kind of working on all of these things in the month of Ramadan. And that's why, you have 30 days of just completely changing. And I know for myself, like I at times feel like I need Ramadan, but absolutely right. I want to have Ramadan for 360 plus days, 365 days, because I wouldn't value it, and I would probably tire out too soon. But at times when I feel like I'm not able to control my anger, I'm not able to control my tongue or my body parts, I feel like that's when I need Ramadan so that I can polish myself up even more.
And I think one thing that you kind of mentioned sort of lightly is that, you know, a big, I think, issue we have in our communities, especially with young people, is, I mean, we already live in such a comparative society where everyone's either, you know, trying to, you know, best another person or comparing themselves to another person, whether it's your intellect, appearance, this, that, whatever you call it, right? We have to really understand that Ramadan is you competing with yourself. You know, man, you're just trying to up your game from last year. It's not about the guy next to you who is like, mashallah, crying during like the final 10 days of dua, or, you know, because to be quite honest, like everyone's emotional process is different, right? I remember when I went to my first Umrah, I bawled like a child. But then when I went again the year after, I didn't actually shed a tear. I was just smiling because it was like seeing an old friend again, you know? So emotional process are different for everybody. And I think something that a lot of youth struggle with is like, man, am I just not doing Ramadan correctly? You know, like if I'm not crying in dua, if I'm not crying behind this, mashallah, this amazing qari's like, you know, recitation, you know, am I just a bad Muslim? And the answer is just no, right? It's the effort that you put in. It's the effort that you put in. If you're putting the effort in, Allah may have just created you a different person where you process things differently, right? And so I think understanding that your job is not to be as great as like Ahmed or Khadija or, you know, Maryam or whatever it is. Your job is to be a better version of yourself from last year. You know, I think that's kind of something to kind of think about if you're a young person watching this, right?
Yep. I mean, you know, I think that's absolutely right. You know, that you work on, you know, just taking some of the things that you struggled with last year and kind of fine tuning those, and, you know, taking them out, adding them in, bringing some works of ibadat into your life, some time of reflection, some time of dua. And I think, you know, because now we're forced to be at home, this is a great time for that. Like you could see a lot of people come, you know, and include myself. You're driving to the masjid, it's like a half an hour drive. You're coming back, you're meeting people. The whole Tarawih experience, whether it's 8 or 20, you know, whichever team you're on, it's a long experience, right? Yes, you know, if you're 20, it's like a 4-hour experience. If you're praying behind Mufti Naman, it's like a 20-minute experience.
It's New York, bro. New York.
Now that you're at home, you have all that time where you can, you know, make dua as much as you want. And I think one thing about Ramadan that people don't think about is that people at times do feel pressure of doing ibadat from other people that are around them. If you're with your boys and, you know, everybody's getting up to leave to go to another qiyam, you're qiyam hopping, or you're going to some iftar, or you're going to play ball, you know, even if you wanted to sit down and make dua, you can't, because everybody else is doing something else. And I think now that we're in the situation where you are forced, or you're giving the opportunity where you're not peer pressured into doing something else, that you can actually take some time out and, you know, make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I think dua is like one of the biggest points of Ramadan. You know, I think Quran is, of course, this Ramadan is the month of the Quran, where you should try to make some sort of connection. If you can't read the Quran, that's fine. Work on reading the Quran. If that's too much for you, or if that's something that you're working on, then listen to the Quran. You know, have it playing on your YouTube playlist like nonstop. But I think another part of Ramadan is, you know, making dua. Now that we have so much time where our commutes and like going to the masjid, this time is cut out. You now have, I was talking to Atir Bhai, and Atir Bhai was telling me that Sheikh Mubin, I finally have 24 hours a day in my day, whereas like I used to have like 21 hours because of my 3 hours of commute. So in Ramadan, you know, that works to our advantage, where we can, you know, maximize that time even more. But I think that actually wraps up our time. That 1 hour flew by pretty fast.
Yeah, man. So when's your next talk show, man?
When's the next talk show? No, yeah, you were talking about something, but you were talking about living up to Ahmed's standards, living up to Abdullah standards.
Oh, man.
I'm trying to live up to Safi's standards, man.
SubhanAllah, man. You don't want to be like me. Trust me, bro.
You're like the Peyton Manning of the youth directors.
The Peyton Manning. Only one, too. SubhanAllah. Yeah. Greatest.
MashaAllah. But I just want to thank everybody, Jazakallah khair, for all the beautiful, and I think we could honestly, this could probably go out for another 2-3 hours. We're just touching, a few different. We've only touched a few different aspects of Ramadan. I think we could probably go on with. There's so much more to be covered. But hopefully, what we'll do, we'll have you all, join us on the Frisco Masjid, live throughout the month of Ramadan, and share some more. And maybe we could do this again during the month of Ramadan as well.
Let's do it, inshallah.
But Jazakallah khair, Sahibai, Mufti Noman, Sister Zainab. Again, we make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes this upcoming Ramadan a beneficial Ramadan for us. That makes it fruitful. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes this a Ramadan that we're able to work on ourselves and, just really fine tune and, eliminate some of those issues that we've been having for years. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this Ramadan a Ramadan that we get closer to Him. With all that's going on, I think something about what you said is really amazing, that you don't know that this could be your last year. And so much is happening that we don't know, but I think that's why it's really important that you really maximize on every moment that you have, especially in the month of Ramadan, that you make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because you might just, your time to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might just be very close. So again, when we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, bless our communities, the Frisco community, the Roots, the Qalam community, the Allen community, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring our families together, bring the whole Dallas community as one, mashallah. A program like this is so beautiful that we have different, community members working together as one for the sake of the Muslims, which is mashallah.
Shefji, before we conclude,
yes.
I wanted to be a little stingy with the viewership that we have here in the platform. So to Brother Safi's point, we had people here last year that we don't have with us this year. I typically try to do this with every program that we have, and there's people that are watching to kind of use it an excuse to get their du'as. I had a classmate, man, last year. Who I was classmate with for 10 years. Sat side by side. This was like
beautiful, brother.
This was my guy. Like literally sat side by side. Then we went overseas together, and then our families were super close. Mashallah. It was fantastic, brother. Right. And so last year around this time, like in just a matter of days, his health declined, and then he went to the hospital. He had a headache. That headache became nosebleeds. That nosebleed became a brain tumor. And then like Friday, I was supposed to go visit him to go hang out with him. And then Wednesday, I'm at his janazah. It was like the most surreal thing ever. Right. Yes. And like until now, like talking about it, trying to process it, it's just so ajib. But to your point, that is absolutely true. And so whoever's watching, whoever does watch this afterwards, just keep this gentleman in your prayers. His name was Mufti Harith Mirza. And so we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not only him, but all those loved ones of ours that have passed on, may they be forgiven for all of their shortcomings.
I'm Mufti Harith, amazing brother. I met him just like a few times. Every time I met him, he brought smiles to people. And again, this time of Ramadan, just a few days before Ramadan, is when our mother passed away. But we definitely make dua for all of our family members, of anybody that's watching or anybody in our community who has lost family members, that they're not here within this Ramadan or the many Ramadan before. I think Ramadan is like a time that we always remember our family. I remember as a kid growing up, Ramadan was, my mother would stand in the kitchen, and she would make pakoras and samosas for the whole of Elizabethtown, Kentucky. And then like moments before, she would tell me, here's a whole batch of food. You have to go to this house, that house, this house. And I would end up doing iftar in my car. But that was my childhood as Ramadan. So we all, I think Ramadan always reminds us of our loved ones. And that gap that they leave behind, it does open up. But we may dua Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless them, bless their graves, forgives their sins, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us people that when we meet our loved ones again, that they're happy with us, that they're pleased with us, that He reunites us in Jannatul Firdaus. Again, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us all the ability to ask for forgiveness, and that He forgives our sins, He forgives the sins of our loved ones, and that He gives us the ability to remember Him throughout this month of Ramadan to make some most of Ramadan. Again, jazakallah khair to all our panelists. Inshallah, I can't wait. And so, a shameless plug. Inshallah, me and Mufti Noman, we will be starting a program in Ramadan for the youth on Sundays for Allen and Frisco. This program, we're on the fence of the title. Either it's going to be called True Believers or Waswasa, the Whispers of Shaitan. We're going to be talking about...
Those are two very opposite things. I'm so confused right now.
Well, the thing is that...
I'm just throwing you all over the place right now.
Yeah.
I give you everything.
That's what people got to join in and listen up what it's going to be about.
Just give you the random clickbaits and
But we're gonna inshallah have a program where we're gonna be going over some of the doubts that people have, some of the things that iman conflicts that we have, to remove those doubts so we can make ourselves into true believers. Whispers that Shaitan puts in our hearts. That's why please join us. Safiba, if you're joining us, then you're taking the discussion. We'd love to have you. But we're gonna have that on Sundays, Sundays at 6:00. But we will put forward the schedule for the programming for the month of Ramadan. I know Sheikh Salah has a lot of great programs, some Quran. We're inshallah be reading one juz a day. But inshallah, stay tuned. Once again, for the third time, jazakallah khair, guys. I really appreciate it. Inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless y'all. Inshallah, we get a chance to do this again.